I want to repeat how nice it is to see everybody. Really good for you to be out. And we're going to be and have been worshiping God, and we're going to worship Him now through hearing God's Word, learning from it. I'd like to introduce this lesson tonight by going to the book of Proverbs, as we're going to be talking about what true wisdom is. In Proverbs chapter 2, the first 5 verses, the writer there leaves us with these words. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. He uses 3 or 4 words there interchangeably. Words like wisdom, understanding, discernment. But he says they're only going to come to you how? If you seek her as silver. This is going to mean, this means that we're going to have to put some effort into it. You know, sometimes I think we approach Bible study and maybe teaching and preaching with the idea that, like some of my students at school, that they're just going to come and sit in the classroom and somehow it's just going to be poured into them. Well, it doesn't work that way, does it? Tonight we're going to learn I hope, some very practical principles from the book of Ecclesiastes. But these principles are about wisdom and how we can actually go to the Bible and learn how to deal with people, deal with circumstances, deal with difficulties. You know, the writer Solomon of the book of Ecclesiastes was a man that experienced so many things in his life. We're going to primarily look at Ecclesiastes, the end of chapter 7 and the first part of chapter 8. By this time in the book, he is starting to see a little more clearly about how life really is. And he gives us some great advice. I want us to start, though, by looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 1. Because there he begins by saying, who is like a wise man? So now he's going to describe this person. And who knows the interpretation of a thing? Who is wise enough? Who can discern something? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the sternness of his face is changed. That's what wisdom can do for you. It can make your face shine. I think most of us want to have a shiny face in this respect. We want to have a shiny face. Point number 1 is going to come from Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 21 and 22. There's 5 principles we want to look at briefly tonight that I think will be very helpful. Verses 21 and 22. The writer says, also do not take to heart everything people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. For many times also your own heart has known that even you have cursed others. I think that's one of the hardest things in the Bible right here. We just read it. Do not take to heart everything people say. I think that's really hard to do. I think it's very hard to do. But yet he says if you're really wanting to live a life that's wise, this is all about wisdom, then you can't take to heart every single thing people say. Even the best people do some bad things. Just think about some of the best people you've ever known in your life. They have done some bad things. They have said some things they regretted. So if even the best people on occasion will say things they regret, then no wonder the writer says, do not take to heart everything people say, because no one ever controls their mouth perfectly. Boy, that's hard, isn't it? That's kind of hard to take. I take things to heart pretty often. I care about what people say. And it says here that you have to be very careful about doing that. Most of the time, that's great. But he says you can't do it every single time somebody says something. You can't do it every time. Most of the time, sure. Not every time. Sometimes we need to make ourselves blind and deaf. And that's hard to do too. Make ourselves blind and deaf. You know, even our closest friends on occasion, can make a harsh, unjust criticism, and they may not even realize it. They may not realize it's harsh. They may not realize it's unjust. And so the writer here says, don't take to heart everything a person says. That's tough. The wise man knows that not everybody is going to like him. I remember the first and only full-time preaching job I ever had. I had some advice given to me from someone that most all of you would know in here, who's preached most of his adult life. And he asked me how, after I'd been there a while, you know, how things were going. And he said, and I said, well, they're going pretty well. I think most people like me. I said, I don't think everybody does. And he says, well, consider yourself lucky that most people like you. It'd be great if everybody did, but they're not. No way in the world are you going to go through life and everybody like you. It's just not going to happen. And that's really what Solomon is saying here, too. Because there's going to be some people that are going to say things to you, and maybe they're trying to make you upset. So he says, don't take everything to heart. You know, because he says, for many times also your own heart has known that even you have cursed others. Realize that you have said some things to people that you shouldn't have said. And hopefully they didn't take it to heart, but maybe they did. So he says, the best of people are going to say things that you can't take to heart. And you just kind of have to turn a deaf ear to what they say. And for me, that's one of the hardest verses in the whole Bible, right there. But yet there's the wisdom from Solomon. It says, don't take everything to heart. He gives us some more advice in the next two verses. Verse 23, all this I have proved by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. As for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? The wise man knows that wisdom and knowledge does not come easy. Did I set out that, what? I will be wise. That's what he said. I will be wise, but what? It was far from me. It didn't come easy. And it never does. You have to seek it with diligence. You know, we have to be diligent in our efforts to study the Scriptures, right? 2 Timothy 2 and 2 Timothy 3 both tell us that. That we have to be diligent in our efforts. We can't pick up the Bible and study it for an hour and assume we know everything we need to know about the Bible. We just can't do it. It doesn't work that way. Also, we have to come to realize that some things, as he puts here, as for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? Some things are simply beyond our understanding. There are certain things about heaven that are totally beyond our understanding. I just recently was reading a book about a man's conception of heaven, and part of it, most of it, the vast majority of it was laughable. It was his attempt to try and explain the unexplainable, and it was pretty sorry. Some things are simply beyond our understanding. The wise man knows he has limitations. You know, in 1 John chapter 3, verse 2, he talks about how we don't know what we're going to be like, but we know we're going to be like Him. We don't know. We don't know exactly what our bodies are going to be like, look like, feel like. And so we have to accept the fact that we just know we're going to be like Him. And that has to be good enough. So the wise man knows that there are limitations to our knowledge and our understanding and deals with it. Well, now into Ecclesiastes 8 for our third principle, verses 2 through 5. I say, keep the king's commandment for the sake of your oath to God. Do not be hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand for an evil thing, for he does whatever pleases him. Where the word of a king is, there is power, and who may say to him, what are you doing? He who keeps his command will experience nothing harmful. And a wise man's heart discerns both time and judgment. The wise man knows and obeys authority. Wisdom warns us to submit to the powers that be, whether we really like it or not. And I think primarily this applies to civil authorities. Not too long ago, CL on Sunday morning was talking about submitting to civil authority from Romans chapter 13. And how important it was. And even at that time, the Roman government was cruel and unjust, and yet they were told to submit to them anyway. Because a society or a nation has to have some rules and regulation. It has to. Otherwise it would be chaotic. He says here, it is folly, it is hasty, it's foolish to defy the authorities unless there is a very, very good reason. Like Peter and the apostles had in Acts chapter 5. Unless there's an extremely good reason, and that of course would be to obey God rather than man. Jesus paid taxes. We've talked about that before. And of all the people who've ever lived, He was the one man that probably didn't need to pay taxes, but yet He did, because He set an example for us. That's why He did it, right? Set an example for us to obey authorities. Well, the wise man knows that the king has power. Verse 4, where the word of a king is, there is power. And who may say to him, what are you doing? The king is the one with power, and the wise man respects that and understands that very thing. In 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter writes to those who are dispersed. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 and 14. Therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. That's the general principle. The general principle, and there's exceptions to that, but the general principle is that civil authorities, the kings, princes, rulers, are going to praise those who do good and are going to take some sort of action against those who don't. And again, that's the general principle. And that government is the one that God put into play. So the wise man knows and obeys authority. Number 4, verses 6 through 8. Because for every matter there is a time and judgment, though the misery of man increases greatly. For he does not know what will happen, so who can tell him when it will occur? No one has power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit, and no one has power in the day of death. There is no release from that war, and wickedness will not deliver those who are given to it. What does the wise man know here? The wise man knows the limitations of his own power. Knows the limitations of his own power. Some things are simply beyond our control. He says, for every matter there is a time and judgment. And many of those things are simply beyond our control, and we can't do anything about them. The wise man understands that and doesn't let that bother him. Can't be anticipated, can't prevent them. Remember what James wrote about in James chapter 4? Remember that person who said he was going to go into such and such a town and buy and sell and get gain? Notice James chapter 4, verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It's even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Now he's not condemning preparing. He is condemning someone who thinks that he has a guarantee for a certain amount of time. Says, I'm going to go there for a whole year and I'm going to do all these things and I'm going to leave God out of the picture. And then God comes back and says, you have no idea what is even going to happen tomorrow, let alone what's going to happen a year from now. So the wise man understands that some things he cannot prevent, some things he cannot know, some things he cannot anticipate. He especially knows that he's limited in his understanding of when death is going to come. He knows that it's appointed for him to die once, the Hebrew writer tells us. But he understands that we don't know when that day is coming. He says, for he does not know what will happen, so who can tell him when it will occur? No one has power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit. And no one has power in the day of death. Yes, we're limited in our understanding of that. We don't know. So we have to live with that. And lastly, he says there in verse 8, there's no release from that war, and wickedness will not deliver those who are given to it. The wise man understands temptation, understands what temptation is, what temptation does. It leads to wicked actions. And he doesn't see how close to sin he can come without being hooked. Remember how James talks about this in James chapter 1, verses 14 through 16. He had the idea of being baited. How Satan baits people. And just like when you go fishing, you use different bait depending on what kind of fish. This is exactly what Satan does. He baits us. He tempts me with something different than he tempts David. Puts a different bait on the end of that hook. What would entice me wouldn't entice David. What would entice David wouldn't entice me. And Satan knows exactly what those things are, and that's what he baits us with. The wise man understands that. Understands that giving in to temptation is going to lead to sin, and therefore he stays away from it. He doesn't see how close he can get to that bait. He stays as far away as possible because he knows what it leads to. That's the wise man. And the last point is in verses 11 through 13. It says, because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set on them to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times, and his days are prolonged, yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before Him. But it will not be well with the wicked, nor will he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he does not fear before God. This world would probably be pretty different if the first part of verse 11 wasn't true. Evil is not always punished immediately. And that's what he tells us. It's not always punished immediately. When someone robs a convenience store, he's not automatically caught as soon as it happens and sent to jail. It doesn't happen that way. So he says, because the sentence is not executed speedily. Criminals are not always caught. Many go scot-free their whole life. And even if they are, they're not always punished in proportion to what they did. At least that we think they should be. So because of this, people see that criminals don't get caught. People see that criminals don't get the type of sentence or punishment they deserve. Therefore, that is a motivation for them to commit wrong. The wise man understands that. The wise man understands that's how the world works. You know, it may be many, many years between the time a person first starts drinking to when he comes down with liver disease. Maybe many, many years before that happens. And so others will see that person seemingly prosper while he's drinking or whatever. It could be, hundreds of different things. But so they see that person seemingly living a fine life, a healthy life, a prosperous life. And so that entices other people to do the same thing. So because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. There is so much to learn in that verse. And this, of course, is something that parents have to teach their children. Because their children see people involved in various activities seemingly getting away with it. And so they will come and ask, well, look at John Doe. He's doing such and such. He never attends church, or he drinks, or he does whatever. And he seems to have a good life. Well, what do we have to tell our children? We have to tell our children what Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 11 says. That's what we need to tell them. Though a sinner does evil 100 times, and his days are prolonged, yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before Him, but it will not be well with the wicked. Eventually, there is a time when all debts have to be paid. That alcoholic pays the debt eventually. Sometimes, at some point, the debt has to be paid. Same way with the person that robs the convenience store. At some point, either in this life or the next, the debt is paid for that. And for everything that's not forgiven, regardless of what it is, an unkind word, some action against someone that we've taken that's wrong, whatever it is, if it is not forgiven, then there is a time when that has to be paid. There's a day when all those debts are going to be paid in full. The Bible is very clear about that, and that's what Ecclesiastes 8 is telling us right here. Even though the wicked prospers and does evil over and over and over again and doesn't get punished in this life, sometime he will get what he deserves. And the wise man understands that, and the wise man doesn't do evil just because he sees someone else doing evil and not paying for it. That's what the wise man learns. That's what the wise man knows. There is a law of sowing and reaping that the Bible has always taught. Whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. And there's no getting around that law. That is a law of God. We might say it's set in concrete. There isn't any way to get around it. We studied probably a couple months ago about King Ahab and some of the things that he did. And remember, he seemingly got away with the murder of Naboth. Remember when he murdered him to get his vineyard? It was a long time ago. We talked about it. He received just payment, but it took years before that happened. Years and years and years later before he received payment for what he did to Naboth and that vineyard. So we have to remember that great thought. I mean, it's something that has to stick with us. And the wicked will be separated from God forever. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. These verses here give us some great practical advice on how to get along in the world. Some of it's kind of hard to take, frankly. It really is. But it comes from God, so we know it's right. We know it's wise. We know it's how we need to live. When Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, this will close our lesson, he ended that sermon by talking about the wise man. And the little kids sing a song about the wise man, but I want to read it to you, those last few verses of Matthew chapter 7. Because he talks there about what a wise man really is and what he's like. Verse 24 of Matthew chapter 7. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock, and the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. And so it was when Jesus had ended these things that the people were astonished at his teaching, For he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. There's the modern day wise man. Jesus said, the one who hears things of mine and does them. And what wonderful advice given to us in the book of Ecclesiastes by a very wise man by the name of Solomon. How to get along in the world, how not to let evil take hold of us, how we can see the actions in the world, see how evil people prosper, and they do. Evil people prosper. We see that. I mean, you don't have to turn the news on more than 2 minutes to see evil people prospering. It's just everywhere. And we can learn that there is a day coming when they will have to pay that debt. The Bible is very clear. We'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, receive that what we have done in the body, whether good or bad. And we can leave the building tonight knowing that we've done good by becoming a New Testament Christian, or if we are one, by if we need to make some sort of confession. We haven't been faithful, then we can do that before we leave. We can go home and have a peaceful night's sleep. If anyone needs to come to that invitation, we encourage you to do so as we stand and sing this song.